Hello students, this is Mr. Goddard, and in this lesson I'm going to be talking to you about an array of objects. What we're going to learn is how to declare, instantiate, and traverse an array of objects. And at the end, what I'm going to expect you to do is to create a class, to create an array of objects of that class, modify them, and then print them out. So this is actually going to require two separate files. One which is the class of what we're going to create, and then another class which will contain objects of that first class. In this case, the class we're going to create here is going to be a ship, and then over here we're going to have a fleet, and we're going to modify them and print them out, and well, you're going to do all that. We're going to do that, look at an example of all of this in the context of a shark and a group of sharks, which I believe is called a herd. So here we go. First off, how do you declare an array of objects in Java? Well, before we go and declare an array, which I actually do down here in this code, I'm going to first create a class. So I'm going to call this the shark class. And we've got instance variables. Our shark has teeth and it has a type. I have a constructor here which just takes an integer and a string and sets the teeth and the shark type to be whatever information it was sent. Then we have a set method for the teeth, just in case we wanted to do something like that, change the number of teeth for whatever reason. And then a toString which will return a single line that is the type and then the number of teeth. So very basic class here, a shark class. Now, if I was in another file, so for instance, another, maybe this is something, this is a reef class, I'm going to declare an array of sharks. And that's all I'm going to do in this, just one line. And this is how I do it. I say shark bracket bracket herd equals new shark and then the bracket 4. And so what that does is it creates an array, so the brackets there indicate, of shark objects. Specifically, this array has length 4, so there's 4 rows if you want to think of it like that. And the name of this array is called herd. So that's the declaration, but now we actually need to instantiate them. So how would you instantiate them? There's two different ways here. So the question is, how do you instantiate an array of objects? If you want each object to be exactly the same, then we could use a for loop. So I have that reef class here, and I say shark herd equals new shark, so that same line as before, and then this new additional line. I have a for loop, and it's just a one line loop body, so I just have that in there. I don't have the brackets for the for loop. So looking at the counter here, for int I equals 0, I less than herd.length, and then I plus plus. And then I say herd I equals new shark 42, and then great white, where 42 is the number of teeth, and great white is the type. So that's one way after these lines have been created, then I would have 4 shark objects, and they would be accessible via the herd array. If you wanted each object to be different, you could instantiate each object in its own row. So for instance, I could say herd 0 is new shark 100 bull shark. Herd 1 equals new shark 300 whale shark. 2, 4 sand shark. These are not meant to be biologically accurate, but rather just some quick examples that I threw together. So here we have actually created 4 separate shark objects with all separate pieces of information. So at this point you might be wondering, okay, what does this look like in memory? And well, it's an array. So we have an array. This is the traditional way I've been writing arrays. It's sort of like as a table with rows. And then the data or the value in each one of these rows is actually an object. So in row 0, we're pointing to a shark object that has its own instance variables there, the type and the teeth. And then row 1, the type and the teeth. Row 2, the type and the teeth. Row 3, the type and the teeth. And they're all different based on the constructors that we saw up there in our reef class. Okay, so sometimes you want to walk through each one of these each one of these objects and do something. So we want to traverse it. So the question stated is, how can you walk through the array and change each object? There are two ways. I mean, anytime you need to walk through an array, the answer is a for loop, and we know of two different types of for loop, the traditional for loop and the for each loop, or the enhanced loop. So the traditional for loop or the for each loop. Both are shown below. In both cases, the number of teeth is altered for every shark object in the array. So I'm going to change it so every shark has 21 teeth. By the way, if you get these lines, or you are on your way to becoming an awesome programmer. So this would be an example of a line that you could put in that reef class. You could say for int I equals 0, I less than herd.length I plus plus, herd I dot set teeth 21. So as this loop goes through, it's going to be I equals 0, I equals 1, I equals 2. So the first time through, it's going to say herd at index 0 set teeth to 21. So that would go up and say, all right, row 0, talking to this object, set the teeth, now you're 21. Then it would loop around, and now I would be 1, so it would be herd 1, set teeth 21. So then it would go to row 1, look at the object that was pointing to, and then talk to that particular object and say, hey, change your teeth to 21. And then for row 2, and then for row 3. And so what's just really fascinating about this is that this item right here, herd bracket I, is a reference to an object. And so we have that whole item right there, and then dot set teeth. And so, the dot set teeth is the method that is on the shark object, and right over here, so what we have here is a shark object. Everything that's highlighted is a shark object, and then we say dot set teeth. So it also just, I say it looks pretty cool because we've got brackets and we've got dots and we've got parentheses all working together, but this is what it takes to become a good programmer. The other way is we could use a for each loop, and here I say for each shark, and I'm going to call it sh in herd sh.setTeeth21. So if you remember, what this does is the for each loop creates a temporary variable called sh, and the first time through this loop, sh is going to point to the item at row 0. So it's pointing to this. So if we just say sh.setTeeth21, then as it loops around internally, the for each loop is iterating through, it's incrementing to go to the next row. And we don't see those internals, but it's going on. So now sh is going to be pointing to this object, and so it's the same line, sh.setTeeth21. So change this to 21, this, and then iterates through this to 21 and this to 21. So both of these are great for loops and good ways of going through and changing everything. So there you go. How could we print each one of these objects out? And pretty much the same way as we did up here. You can use the traditional for loop or the for each loop. So once again, int I equals 0, I less than herd.length, always using the dot length method for walking through arrays, starting at 0, putting the less than, then using the dot length to make sure that we are not going to go out of bounds on that index. And then system.print line herd bracket I. So the first time through, obviously that's going to be pointing to the first shark object, or I should say the shark object in row 0, and it's going to call the toString method. And we already saw that the shark class did have a toString right up there. So and then as this iterates through, I is going to equal 0, so it's going to print out, or sorry, it's going to equal 1, so it'll print out the shark object in row 1, then row 2, then row 3. The same thing happens here. This is the for each loop for each shark that we will call sh in herd print sh. So sh is pointing First time through to the bull shark, then next time through to the whale shark, then the sand shark, then the tiger shark. I would encourage you to copy these lines of code into a reef class yourself, just to kind of experiment and see what's going on with all of that. Whenever you've done that, satisfied with that you understand what's going on, then you can move on to this, which is writing a class called enemy ship. And I want you to include 2 or more instance variables, a custom constructor, and a set method for one of the instance variables, and a toString. So very similar to what we did with the shark, but now we're going to call this enemy ship. And then write another class called enemy fleet, and declare and instantiate an array of 5 enemy ship objects. So whereas in our examples we had sharks and herds, now we have ships and fleets, or a fleet which contains an array of ships. Go and print out the array, and then walk through the array and change each enemy ship using the set method. Maybe this each ship has one of its instance variables could be the crew size, or the amount of goods that it's carrying, or I'm kind of thinking of game examples like how many cannons it has or something like that, or its firepower. I don't know, whatever you want to do. Change it, print it out, and then print out the array one more time so that we can see that. So obviously the toString method needs to print out not only it needs to print out those instance variables, one of which gets changed. That way we'll be able to see the change. I have an extension here. It's quite a lot of information. I'm not going to read through that, but if you want to take this to the next level, go for it. All right, so just to recap, we've talked about how to print every object out in an array, how to walk through or traverse an array of objects. We looked at what that actually looks like in memory, and we gave an example of a class. I guess the class was all the way up here. The class, and then another class which contains an array of objects of that first class. So hope that's helpful. This is a great lesson. I feel like it's one of the missing lessons, something that's not talked about in a lot of books, or if it is, it's kind of skipped over real quickly. But if you can get this, then you are, like I said, on your way to becoming an awesome programmer. So good luck programming, and thanks for watching.